Ladies and gentlemen, we finally got it done. Welcome to another episode. But today we're going to talk a little bit of NBA Finals. We got the opportunity to have a really good matchup. We are recording this after the Celtics were able to win Game 1. And it is my pleasure to finally welcome my good friend Josué Sédrjo. You could catch him OnPoint Scouting, and also you could catch him on his podcast that he has, Quebec Insider. Josué, welcome, and thank you for making my dreams come true, my friend.
That's a great way to say it. We've been trying to do this for a long time. That's a very long time. So I'm happy to be on. I'm happy for us to talk a little NBA Finals. I think there was a lot of stuff that we thought going into it, and we had an opportunity to test some of our hypothesis into Game 1.
Absolutely. We're not going to waste any time. Let's kind of like start thinking. Okay, going into it, we're thinking about the setup. You're thinking about these two teams. You got Boston and Dallas, right? And the first thing where we were texting back and forth, and I think the first thing that I started asking myself was, how much pressure is on Boston to win this series? I don't know if that's something that you kind of thought about, but for me, I was starting to pay attention to it, and I was like, okay, you're talking about somebody like Jason Tatum, who's under 30, who we keep forgetting how much experience Tatum has. He came into the league so young. And it seems like, they got the chance to go to all these Eastern Conference finals and then get a chance to taste the finals. Again, obviously they lost against the Warriors. But now, how different is it? Like, what was the mindset? Or are there some things that you're kind of looking into going into this matchup compared to Dallas, on the other hand, where in my opinion, I kind of started thinking about it like they were playing with a bit found money, right? Nobody really expected Dallas to really be in this situation. Everybody was thinking it was going to be the Nuggets. Everybody was going to think if the Clippers figure it out, they're going to be able to go far. And then the way Minnesota were able to eliminate the Denver Nuggets, we kind of put ourselves in a situation where we're like, okay, Dallas, can they really make it? And this is a battle-tested team going into these finals. So I'm wondering if the pressure, first of all, going into these games is a bit different on both sides.
So I agree and disagree with you on what you just said. So the part where I agree is the pressure on Boston. And it's not so much about the individuals, Jason Tatum in terms of his style of play, Jaylen Brown about his stature in the league, whether is he a higher end all-star, mid-level all-star, Kristaps Porzingis, whether justification of the trade, his impact on winning, some question whether or not he's actually a true ace in the hole. Drew Holiday, in terms of, yes, we know what we do defensively, but then offensively, he's kind of that's kind of the reason why Milwaukee felt they needed change, because they didn't think he gave him enough punch. We could go through all the roster and there are individual questions. But the bigger question is more about Boston as a team because of how many opportunities they've had thus far in this current iteration of the team. And by iteration, I'm talking about the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum being together. You're looking at over the last 7 years since Jason Tatum has been drafted. You're looking at 4 conference finals in total, in addition to an NBA Finals appearance. So it's almost like, how many chances are you going to get, and how many are you going to chances are you going to get with this good of a roster before you break through? So the pressure is much more on a team standpoint in terms of, yes, you've been successful to a certain extent, and that needs to be acknowledged, but it's also how many chances are you going to get, because most championship team, if you go through NBA history, there's a progression, but also there's a limited amount of chances. And you could say historically, the core Boston has had more chances than the average quote unquote NBA championship team. But at the same time, this is the first year where you can truly look at the roster 1 through 7 and say they truly have the best and the most amount of talent in the league 1 through 7. So that's the Boston part. That part I agree with you. The part where I disagree a little bit is the Dallas part, because to me, this is not about found money. The Kyrie Irving trade was heavily, heavily scrutinized. That was a big risk that Nico Harris and Mark Cuban took by bringing in the character and the player, much more about the antics than the skill, and in terms of how would he fit in the chemistry. This team went to the Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. This is a Western Conference Finals this year that was wide open. I think going into the playoffs, you had at least 6 if not 7 teams that thought to themselves, if we don't make the Western Conference Finals, it's a failure this year. And I think the Mavs counted themselves as one of those teams, especially after the deadline. So that meant what? That meant as much as it was in the middle of the Thunder series, they kind of looked around and go, wait, the Nuggets are struggling. The Wolves don't have that much experience. If we take care of business here, we really have an opportunity to go far. That was one thing. But at the same time, Luka is looking at this like, I've been a EuroLeague champion when I was 18. I went to Western Conference Finals 2 years ago. I have a contract situation on the low, that's going to come to a head 18 months from now. As a franchise, Dallas, the pressure to surround Luka with winning talent and to establish him individually as one of the top players and Dallas as a championship team, the pressure is kind of now. So there is it's not just found money. It's found money from a chemistry standpoint with the trade deadlines acquisitions. But as a franchise, I do think there is a fair bit amount of pressure internally in Dallas to win this NBA Finals.
You know, I'm looking at, you know, that's a fair point of what you said. And even like with Luka, right? I think the fact that, you know, you get the chance to play professional for so long, you get the chance to be MVP of arguably, you know, people are going to call the second best league in the world.
I believe it is. I believe it is. I
there's
straight up, and beyond that, EuroLeague, Eurobasket, which I forget the Olympics. To me, the Eurobasket is the second biggest tournament to win behind the World Cup, just because of how many good teams there are, and the fact that it's a 24-team tournament. So it's not just a random international tournament.
And it's like it further talks about the point that I was making, where it's like these guys come into the NBA so young. You know, they get so many chances to go to the conference finals, right? Like, and we said it's hard to win, but you're in there so long, so young. People are ready to write it off as a failure. Like people are already talking about, wake up, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. But you don't forget that these guys a couple years ago, we're talking about these guys who weren't even in their physical prime yet and still have so much room to grow. It's crazy.
I mean, you can make the argument. Usually, if you're talking about prime, for me, prime years of an NBA player is year 7 to 10. You can argue 6 to 10 in this day and age where kids come in younger. Yeah. So, and that's kind of the crossover between physical prime and mental prime, right? Where you've accumulated all this knowledge over 6 seasons, 6 or 7 first season in the NBA, different contexts, different matchups, different playoff series. And then physically, you're still young enough that you decide to get it done, you can get it done. This is year 7 for Jason Tatum. This is year 8 for Jaylen Brown. Like, they are basically starting that prime, like you just talked about. The fact that the team was so good gave him almost like instead of them starting from zero, they had a leg up on the competition, that they started their career already on a good team. And because of that, people kind of adjusted expectations instead of being like, well, the normal development for a young player is to have that's coming into a rebuilding team is our team becomes a championship contender in year 5, year 6, maybe year 7, which is exactly where they're at. If you want to, I will say, if you want to look back at last year and say, oh, they gave up a prime opportunity, I have some time for that. I definitely can agree with that part. But at the same time, all right, so you're saying, José, you're saying in year 6 for Jason Tatum, in year 7, they had a prime opportunity. That's right on schedule. They're not behind. They've had opportunities they didn't take care of, but they're not behind schedule. However, they need to give their best in this particular series. They're with the roster, with where they're at in their development, this is it right here. Personally, I believe this is it right here. And they took a giant step in game 1.
Absolutely. And it's like, so let's kind of go into these the chess moves and going into game 1 and whatnot. You know, the big question going into game 1, and now we're really going to get into it. This is what we were talking about back and forth. For me personally, the first question that I had was how were they going? The big story going into this game was Porzingis.
Yes.
So I was, in my mind, I'm like, how are they going to integrate Porzingis? Joe Mazzulla, listen to this, makes the first chess move by deciding to not start him. A lot of people don't think about that, but there's a chess game that goes into playing basketball. You go through all the postseason. You go through the week because they had a lot of time to prepare compared to the old compared to past series. They've had like almost a week to be prepared for this. You go through all this, you start to wonder if the fact that they put Porzingis off the bench kind of played a factor in the preparation that Dallas had. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't really pay attention to. Like, the chess game started way before the series even happened, which I found was amazing.
No, I agree. And I think so. Two things. Number one, we knew he was going to play. I think it was fairly known that he was going to be available for game one, but you still don't know where is he going to be conditioning wise. Where's the injury? I believe it's a calf injury. You know, how's the calf going to react? He is coming into the NBA finals. Like, if you're ever going to come back from an injury, I don't necessarily recommend coming back in game one of the NBA finals. You know,
Right.
a little
after almost a month of not playing.
After 30, I think it was 38 days that was, you know, not playing, resting, and obviously he's not fully healthy. He's still managing the injury. But the one thing that I really think Mazzulla betted on was the adrenaline. That this guy has the opportunity to play his first NBA Finals. This is the furthest he's been in the playoffs in his career, right? Like Kristaps Porzingis is a 2015 NBA draftee. He's been in the league for 9 years now. He's never passed the first round. And you know, some people in New York would question the competitive stamina. Some people in Dallas would say the same. I don't think this is a guy that's out here just having a good time. I do believe this guy does care about winning. And I think how he's integrating himself in the Boston roster, where a lot of guys in his stature would not have been happy with a quote unquote lesser role. And for him, it's been about the entire year about winning. How can I meld my skill set to maximize the output of the team? And this guy came in game one and he was playing balls to the wall, man. I wrote down the stretch where for 12 possessions, there was 8 high energy plays that this guy made right away into quarter one. We can get into it once we start breaking down the game. So the first part was the adrenaline. The second part to me was the matchup at the center position. So I believe, and this is my guess, this is me reading into what Mazzulla was trying to do. He saw Horford and Gafford as one where if there's a switch situation, we believe Gafford is not going to be a threat one-on-one scoring. And if he slips into the pocket, we are going to be able to handle him one-on-one. Versus Derek Lively that can put a little more pressure on the rim from a dribble it up and do stuff standpoint. We're going to put even more length on him with matching Kristaps' minutes. I believe they were matched up minute for minute throughout the entire game. By putting more size on him, we're going to negate Derek's offense entirely, whether it's rim rolling or any stuff in the pocket or any kind of stuff like that. And then offensively, Lively is much more comfortable switching out to guards than Gafford is. Well, he's not going to be able to do that because Kristaps is going to be sniping 30-foot bombers. And because of that, well, for one, I think Derek Lively tried to be like physical and like all intense and everything.
Yeah.
Basically fouled out in the entire quarter, which that wasn't good. But I think Mazzulla thought by matching their minutes is going to be better for Kristaps because he's coming into a matchup that's more advantageous for him. So that made sense for me. I didn't think about that so much in terms of whether he was going to start but came off the bench. But once I saw it, I was like, yeah, for this game, that was the right move.
Let's talk a bit about the matchups. Like, that was also a big question that we had. We were like, how are these teams going to match up? And this is where I think the game kind of opened up. I know you probably have the numbers in terms of threes for the first quarter, where it was crazy numbers with what Boston had, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Go.
No. I was just gonna say. I mean, in the first quarter, they took 14 3-point attempts. Boston did, and they made 7. And I and in fact, they started the quarter 3 of 9 because there were so many offensive rebounds that they got that were kicked out for wide open threes. They were like, well, even though we don't necessarily have a rhythm in it, it's an offensive rebound 3. Like, let's just take it. And even though it wasn't necessarily the best process, but then they made their next 4. So they finished the quarter with 50%. And that was a big driver in stretching out their lead in the first quarter. For me, when I look at this game, I think of 2 things. I think of the style of the game, and I think of the stats. So we touched a little bit about the style, and I mean, you can't discuss game one without talking about the impact that Kristaps Porzingis had, especially
Mhm.
the stretch. And I referred to this, the stretch in the first quarter. The game starts. First of all, I want to point out, game started tight, right? It was 15-14 Dallas halfway through quarter one. Like, both teams came out to play. Like, there was an intensity. There was no passengers. People were locked in. Like,
Yep.
if there was ever a question about who's nervous and all that, like, that wasn't going to be a thing. Then the basketball game started, and I'm gonna roll out 12 plays in a row here just for you to feel the impact that Kristaps Porzingis had, as well as the emotional style, the emotional impact they had on the crowd and on the team. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
this is it's 24-14 Boston, and at the end of this stretch, it's 37-20 end of the quarter. So it goes Porzingis dribble, drive, dunk around Derek Lively. Then Porzingis challenge contest on a Jaden Hardy drive that was out of control. Then Porzingis gets a post up two that he scores on with a rip shot to Josh Green, by the way, saying, don't get close to me. TV timeout. We come back at a timeout. Jaden Hardy randomness bank two. Like, he made it, but as Boston, you're like, good defense. Then there's a Jason Tatum step back three that he makes. No movement, no action. It wasn't the best shot, but he made it. So, momentum continues. Boston gets a stop. We come down. They come down on offense. And then what I call those zingers. So when a big guy shoots a 30-footer three and he swishes it, I call those zingers. So Kristaps Porzingis makes a zinger three from 30 foot. He comes back. He blocks Kyrie on a one-on-one creation. They come down in transition. Sam Hauser gets a corner three in front of the bench. Not only does he swishes, he turns around. The bench is exploding. The crowd is exploding.
Yeah.
Then
faded to the corner.
Faded to the corner. And they come back down on defense. Jaden Hardy takes a horrible three that the Celtics rebound. Then there's a bad possession. Tatum turns the ball over. Josh Green picks it up in transition. He tries to go, I guess, the adrenaline again of the finals. Kristaps Porzingis runs back and absolutely stuffs the living daylight out of him. Those were 12 plays. 12 plays. Out of those 12, that's 8 high energy plays right there. That set the tone for the whole game. The style was free flowing. When it's like that, that's good for Boston. That's bad for Dallas.
That's I'm just going to add on to that. It's crazy because in that first quarter, in 7 minutes, Porzingis had to further, give more juice to what you're saying. Porzingis had 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 3 blocks in 7 minutes.
That's right. Loud blocks.
We might as well call the first quarter the Porzingis quarter.
I think so. Very much so. Very much so.
But what's interesting is that that's one thing that I was thinking about. Boston is really good when they could push and they could just open, spray out, drive and kick, corner threes. That's when they're at their best.
Yes.
You're looking at two different things, okay? Going into this game, the teams wanted to match up differently, and I found that interesting. You're looking at Dallas. What they wanted going into it when it came to their starters is they wanted Luka on Drew.
Yep.
Derrick Jones was on Jason Tatum. PJ Washington was on Jaylen Brown. Daniel Gafford was on Al Horford. And Kyrie Irving was on Derek White. Okay?
Yes.
The cross matches happened because Boston didn't want those matchups.
Super key right
Very
here.
key. So you're looking at Boston. They wanted Jaylen Brown on Luka. Drew Holiday,
which was the right choice. He's their best defender on them. That's the right choice. That's who you want.
Drew Holiday on Kyrie.
Also the best matchup individually. That's what you want.
Derek White, PJ Washington, Jason Tatum on Daniel Gafford, which is big. We're going to talk about that.
Yes.
And Al Horford on Derrick Jones Jr.
Yes.
The way that they matched up. Okay, so two things. The way that they matched up, it allowed them to run free, and Dallas was not able to get the matchups that they wanted. So that opened up more of the threes. That's why, if you look back at the first quarter was very chaotic. If from a Dallas standpoint. They're not able to match up the way that they want to. So it's the ball gets to the corner. You got Daniel Gafford closing out to Al Horford on that first possession. You got everybody's just rotating. They're not able to get matched up. The next part of that is the game is so fast. Dallas, you cannot try to match these guys 3-point wise. The game has to slow down for Dallas. Dallas has to either decide they're going to use Luka, get to the paint, right? lob a little. Maybe this is where I'm just thinking. Maybe this is where the roll to the rim. They're doing a really good job at taking that away. Maybe what needs to happen is a bit more dunker spot action where like that's a threat. And Luka can get to the paint. The spacing's a little bit different. And then maybe Luka's able to, delay the way that he's really good at doing, delay a little bit, throw it up to somebody that's maybe just there at the dunker. But then the next thing is this. Jason Tatum being on a big. If Jason Tatum wins the rebounding matchup, right? And the big doesn't win, doesn't crash board, doesn't put any physicality on Jason Tatum. That further helps Boston. Because now Jason Tatum can rebound and push. And we're looking at the numbers that Jason Tatum had in this, right? Just going to talk about it real quick. It showed a level of maturity, which ties back in what we were talking about at the beginning. Jason Tatum having 16 points, 5 assists, and 11 rebounds in this game. It showed maturity.
On 6 of 16. Like, this is a game he's not shooting the ball well, and yet the defensive effort is there. I believe he didn't take his first shot until 3 minutes left in the first quarter.
But that's what we're talking about, experience. You're talking about somebody who's still young, but somebody with so much experience going into that situation. I took it as the maturity. Him being able to understand that, let the game come to me, but there's other ways that I could affect. Started off the first quarter on a big. Your job is to rebound. But I don't think Dallas was ready for that.
I think no. So, I mean, yes, to me, yes and no. So I think they were ready for this because the main reason you're putting Tatum on a big, and the starter is Daniel Gafford, is that Luka obviously, and this is for Kyrie as well, the pick and roll with the dive big that's where all Dallas's offense starts, right? Pressure on the rim. It's 2-on-1 coming down. What decision do you make? Are you going to Kyrie or Luka, or are you going to protect the rim? Either way, 70% shot at the rim is the best offense. If it's Tatum on the big, what's Boston going to do? That's a switch automatically. So right there, Luka loses the opportunity to roll to the rim. So then let's say he still wants to have the ability to turn the corner. Well, then, okay, let's call either Jones or Washington. Whoever has, let's say, Porzingis on him, let's call him over. Well, let's say you do get that, right? And instead now Porzingis or Horford is now dropping, right? Because those guys are not guarding Gafford. Tatum is. So now after the first switch, Tatum is switched, and now it's Jones or Washington, whoever the big is on, coming down to set the screen. And let's say Boston is dropping in this situation. Well, if the Jones or Washington is rolling, they're rolling into Gafford because Gafford is at the rim. So now the Dallas offense is congested. Okay, take away the roll. So then let's say they go back and go to the corner. Well, now Luka is on a switch on an ISO, and can he burn him? Can he cook? Yes, of course he can. But can he do that for a whole game? No, that's not the Dallas offense. So right there, Boston has taken away 40%, 35%, 45% of Dallas' bread and butter by that Tatum on Gafford adjustment. And a huge key in game 2 for me is going to be how do they manipulate that to create, like you said, paint touches, guys in the dunker spot that are malleable, that at least make Boston think, and more corner threes. And I got some stats on this here that were to me were mind-blowing.
Let's do it.
Dallas scored 75 points on 84 possessions in competitive time. That's less than a point per possession. That's bad. That you're not going to win. Most likely you're not going to win any NBA game when that's the case. Boston shot 16 of 41 in competitive time from 3-point range. They out attempted 30 to 27, 30 Boston threes, 30 corner Boston threes to 27 3-point shots in total. So Boston had more corner threes than Dallas had threes total. And we know Dallas needs corner threes in order to live. And in fact, Dallas only had 3 corner threes in the entire game. Luka had only 6 assist opportunities. All stats thanks to Second Spectrum. So he had 1 assist he had an assist, the teammate made the basket. But he had 5 other opportunities. But this is a guy we're talking about 10, 15, 20 assist opportunities per game. And Boston was able to take all that away in big part due to that starting lineup adjustment of putting a wing on the big and forcing Dallas to manipulate the matchups, and they weren't able to do it.
Mm. I want to, like you said, Luka 1 assist. Like, going into this game, Luka is going to get his 30. But the fact that they were able to take away those corner threes, the fact that they were able to, once you said, shrink the floor, right? The closeouts are not as long now. The fact that they were able to not allow the other guys to get off, like, that's the whole Dallas offense.
I mean, think about it, right? First half, Jaylen Brown scintillating, especially on defense, right? We're talking about steals we got pick sixes like twice on Luka. We're talking he doesn't get beat too much at the point of attack. There's even times where Luka, like, he would get to the paint, stop and do an up fake, and Boston would retreat because they're like, we're going to guard you one-on-one. We're not going to bring help because we don't want to open any shooters. We don't want to open the lob. And Luka would be like up faking, trying to like draw two on the ball to kick it to the corner. And like sometimes he was wide open and he didn't realize it was wide open because he's in the normal mode of, okay, I'm going to balance the game between scoring and assisting. And I'm looking for guys in the corner. And Boston's like, I mean, you can throw it to the corner if you want, but like, they're not open. Those guys are not going to be open. And that, even in the run that Dallas made in the third quarter, all those were Luka points. They weren't Dallas offense points. So that was like, okay, Luka got hot, and Boston kept their strategy of we're going to defend you one-on-one, and Luka's going to make his because he's an amazing player, top 5 player in the league. But it wasn't Dallas offense picking up steam or Dallas offense getting back on track. And I think, and we can talk about this a little bit, when you look ahead to game 2, one of the things to me that Dallas is going to put emphasis on is, hey, Luka, Kyrie, you got to score. Hey, you got to score from the jump, because Boston's not going to alternate. They're not going to go to their second base defense of bringing help unless you start really to cook. If you're just mid-cooking, they're not going to change nothing. So you have to not only be aggressive, but you have to draw fouls so that Jaylen Brown goes to the bench. His help defense in second half, the blocks and on the help side, unbelievable. That can't happen again in game 2. So foul trouble. You have to not only blow past them, you have to draw help, because otherwise, like, how are we going to get into our main offense? That, to me, is what Dallas has to do to really put the screws to Boston. Offense versus Boston's defense.
That's interesting because, like, again, like you mentioned, they went on a little bit of a run. At one point, I believe that they cut it almost to 8. They cut it to 8.
They did cut 8. They did, yes.
They cut it to 8. A couple of things. So how dangerous is it for Boston that they kind of allowed Dallas that gap to come back, understanding that it's a long series? Or is it? I want to know what your opinion is on that.
So for me, how they reacted told me a lot, because in that run, you saw Boston's offense go to a bad place, let's say, right? The place where Boston fans start pulling their hair and go, oh, I hate this team. How they responded right after, when it was 72, I believe it was 72-64, Zula calls timeout. They go on a 14-0 run, and all of those started and were all keyed by Boston driving past the initial defender, no matter what. If they would drive, defender would stop, whether it was Brown or Tatum. Drive, defender stops him, crossover, go the other way, drive, keep driving, and get all the way to the paint to draw help so that we can get into our drive kick game. Because when Boston is in their drive kick game and they're flowing, I truly believe nobody can stop. The only people that can stop Boston is themselves. When they decide, you know what, it's a little too hard to get to the paint, let's just settle. Let's just get into one-on-one creation. Let's rely on one-on-one creation. When Boston's offense goes to the mud, then they get into trouble. But they're the ones responsible for when their stuff gets into the mud. And looking ahead to game 2, you said this. You said Dallas has to slow the game down. I think for Dallas's offense, it might not be the best thing, because the fact that they play slow means it's not necessarily great from a lob and driving kick game. But in terms of overall product, I absolutely 100% in agreement with you. When I was thinking about from a Dallas standpoint to looking ahead to game 2, Nekias Duncan and Steve Jones do a great podcast with call the Dunker Spot. One of the terms that they've coined is playing in the mud, and I like that term a lot. What does playing in the mud mean? It's a game that's marked by free throws on both ends, offensive rebounds for your team, no live ball turnovers, and you run only when you have clear advantages created. So
Bingo.
from a Dallas standpoint, Boston players complaining about fouls, celebrating buckets, a stop that turns into a 3-on-2, or live ball turnovers. If the game's in the mud, a tie game, 5 minutes to go, Dallas thinks to themselves, we have the two best one-on-one shot creators. If it's going to come down to a shot creation game, we're going to win that game. And the way that we can do that is by controlling the pace of the game and making sure that Boston does not get into their drive and kick game. So better at the point of attack. If you're going to bring help, there needs to be multiple efforts. There wasn't too many multiple efforts in game one defensively. I know that for sure. And lastly, if there's ever a chance where Luka is switched onto Al Horford or Kristaps Porzingis, it's not so much about Luka needing to cook them. Same thing for Kyrie, by the way. Luka or Kyrie needing to cook them is Gafford or Lively. Once they roll, hey, man, you got to get that offensive rebound. If we got to bring Derrick Jones or PJ Washington as well, that should be an offensive rebound opportunity because we slow the pace down. We make Boston tired. We frustrate them. And when you come back on offense, then now they're tired. They might not want to do that driving kick game just as much.
That's you. I couldn't even say it any better. I think exactly what you're saying for the listeners, because that was very well detailed. And that's exactly what I was thinking. You just have to be a bit more selective with your shots. Boston has the luxury of being able to come down and be able to jack threes.
Yes.
But for every 5 threes that they take, you can't have 3 ISOs on one and 1 quick dribble pull up 3, and then you're gonna lose yourself in the math when it comes to that, right? So I do think, like, yes, they got to play fast, which is they did something in the third quarter that kind of helped them get back into it. I don't know if you caught it, but it was very subtle. They switched the matchup. They put Luka on Derek White. And then Dallas almost embraced the fact that Kyrie was on Jrue Holiday. Because what they wanted was they wanted to put Jrue Holiday on at the beginning of the game, right? They wanted to put Jrue Holiday on Derek White. Mm-hmm. They ended up switching. Here's where the chess game comes in. Derek White on the rise of a shot. What is Derek White doing? Getting back. So now what does that mean? That means that Luka can rebound and push the tempo. That speeds them up, right? So I think there's definitely that where I think they figured out a couple of things that I do believe are going to manifest themselves in game 2, which is what I think is going to be very important for us to start thinking about. Anything else you wanted to hit on? Like,
so we
could honestly go all day.
Yeah, of course. But I mean, we want to make sure the listeners have something concise for them to look ahead to game 2 tomorrow, because I do think it's a must win for Dallas. As much as could I see a scenario where Boston wins and then Dallas comes home and it's 2-2? Yes, I could. But at the very least, Dallas should look at this as a must win. But if they're going to lose, this has to be a game on their terms. In the mud. We talked about controlling the tempo. We talked about Boston being frustrated. That means Boston needs to expect these 2 following things. To me, are absolutely gonna be. There's no question in my mind. I expect it. Number 1, Luka's gonna come out in the scoring mentality. Any big that switched out to him, he's gonna look to create space and create offensive rebounding possibilities, like we talked about. And he's gonna post up to score. If they do that thing, like you just mentioned, where Derek White's on him, to me, he's going to go to the post and at the very least try to put fouls on Derek White and at least force Boston to bring in a defender where Dallas can pick at one-on-one, whether that's with Luka with the ball in his hands or Kyrie with the ball in his hands. So to me, that's number 1.
Just going to add on to what you're saying. Sorry to cut you off. But PJ Washington a couple of times. PJ Washington was able to attack Derek White, to what we were talking about in this.
He tried to give a lift to what Kyrie and Luka were doing at pushing the ball, attacking the rim a couple of times.
Because he's their third best scorer.
He's their third best scorer, and if he's going to be successful, his threes have to come from the corners instead of above the break.
Above the break.
So for that to happen, Luka and Kyrie have to score to force Boston to go, oh wow, okay, we can't handle them one-on-one. We got to bring help. Whether it's up to touch, whether it's double, whether it's a blitz, something's got to happen to force Boston to get into rotation so that Washington can have his corner threes. The second thing that Boston needs to expect is Porzingis, whenever he is in a pick and roll, they're going to switch those, especially if he's rolling to post up. And Boston has to make sure that his post ups touches are below the free throw line. He was hot. The adrenaline was amazing. He was feeling himself. He made everything. I mean, the first quarter was an amazing display of basketball. All his touches were above the free throw line. Those are low 40% attempts, right? Over a long period of time, he's not going to make those at a high rate. If his post-up touches are below the free throw line, now you're getting to low 60s. Now that's interesting. Now that's something that's good offense for Boston. So Boston has to expect that. Porzingis has to expect that. He's got to make sure that when he's switched on, he rolls deep to below the free throw line, dotted line as much as possible, whether it's on this side or in the middle, and then get into his post-up game from there.
No, that's definitely something to be look at. That's definitely something that we have to look forward to, especially you know, you wonder if you know, the injury, if it's hindering him a little bit, because
test
obviously
it out. If you're Dallas, you want to test it. That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and especially for his playing style, right? The fact that he's a shot making big, it doesn't really help him. So it doesn't really affect him, the fact that he can kind of like stand out and just be a bit more of a standstill player. So again, going back to what you said, you got to test him. You got to see if he can move him laterally. You got to see if he's going to want to be physical, right? We know he's going to block shots. We know he's going to be very effective on that end. Josué Sédrjo, thank you so much. It was amazing.
It was.
We're gonna keep looking at what we got going into game 2. Yeah, catch him on his podcast, Quebec Insider. It's a fun time. I learned a lot from you guys, so appreciate you, and hopefully we could do this again for game 2.
Likewise. I wish every listener a great game 2. It should be a great chess game.